I'm sitting in a position which you never adopt when you're in a bus. You don't turn around to the person behind you and say, hello, who are you, where do you come from? And this is a sign of, can you hear me at the back? This is a sign of what has happened to our society, the Western world in general, is that we are isolated. We do not know who our neighbors are. We do not speak to the people who live in the same street. And this is a great change from what existed a couple of hundred years ago and exists in many parts of the world, where you knew everybody. But knowing everybody can be a nuisance. And one of the reasons why people left the countryside to go into the towns was they wanted to get away from the people who were spying on them, who were complaining about their private lives, who were looking through their windows, and people came to cities in order to seek autonomy, independence, a new life, to get away from their past. And of course, every advantage always carries with it a disadvantage, and loneliness became one of the characteristics of the city. So, what should we do next? What we have to discover is we cannot just restore the past. We've got to invent something different. And we cannot just say, let us talk to one another, because the way we talked in the past was totally different from the way we would like to talk in the present. In the past, you had to talk in a way which respected the superiority of the person you're talking to, or talk down to somebody who was inferior to you. Social class dominated interaction, and you also had forms of conversation which were shaped by the profession in which you were. Academics still continue the old idea that when they talk, they are engaging in disputation, which means that one of them has got to win and the other one has got to be made to shut up and to prove that you're right. And the idea of conversation as a battle has long existed. And also there are forms of conversation which are ways of avoiding talking about things that really matter to you. And we have developed humor as one of those stratagems which enables to evade anything too personal. We've learned how to talk about football and about politics in ways which, again, distracts us from talking about what we really care about. And the question is, how do we talk about what really matters to us? How do we make conversation something which is useful in life and not simply a distraction? And if you agree with me that one of the great ambitions of our generation and of the future is to discover the diversity of the world and to discover what I think is the great adventure of our century, to discover who inhabits the world, because every single person, we now think, unlike what we thought in the past, every single person is interesting. We have to discover how he is interesting. He may think he is not interesting, but since each person has a different view of what the world is like, the old idea that you could stereotype them and put them in categories and say an Englishman is like this and a person of this religion is like that, this is just as false as the idea people had of science in the past, that everything was earth, air, fire and water, whereas now everything is a nano particle, and quantum physics has changed the idea of what these particles are, what the world is beyond what the visible world is. It's the same with individuals. Every one of you is a very different person, and that changes everything. In the past, if you were a peasant or an artisan or a teacher or something, you'd be expected to behave like one of those. But now we see that you are different, and we don't know who you are, and you're an enigma. You're a puzzle. You're a puzzle not only to yourself, but also to everyone else. And this is the great mystery of our time. How do we penetrate into this puzzle? And the only way we can do it is by talking, and talking not just in the way of chit-chat, but by conversation which has to be thought up in a reasoned way. And this is what I've been trying to do in the Oxford Muse, which is a foundation in which I participate. What we have developed is a menu of conversation. The menu of conversation looks like a restaurant menu, and it's got hors d'oeuvre and fish and meat and pudding and so on. But under each of those headings there is a list of questions, 3 or 4 questions under each one. And the questions are the most profound questions about what matters to you. If I asked you, how have your priorities changed in the course of your life, and how would you like them to change in the future? Now you just think about that. How many hours do you want to think about that for? It's a very hard question, isn't it? But it's the most important question in your life. Why have your priorities changed? Are your dreams serious? Are they practical? Are they possible? How do they relate to other people? And what I would do in these conversations which I organize is I put 2 of you together. For example, you 2 together. You've never met each other. And I give you this question to talk about with a menu. And I expect you to talk about it for at least 2 hours. So you've got to think about it and discuss it, and one of you would say what you think, and the other person would say what they think, and then you discuss why and so on. And after that you would choose another question. For example, what have been the most important friendships in your life? And what kind of friends do you want? Obviously you cannot find the friends you might ideally want. It is an accident. Many friendships are formed in childhood and never renewed. Old people lose their friends and feel isolated as a result. Friendship is one of the most important things that make a person's life. Why don't we discuss this matter more thoroughly? Let us think about each of our friends. Why have we chosen them? Accident? How can we increase them? And then I'd say to you, why have you not got a friend in every country? Is that not a way of discovering the world? In a way of taking a sample from every country and just seeing from the friend that you have in whatever country it is that they are not what your stereotype of that country suggests. Each one of them has got something in common with you and something not in common with you. And then you would reflect on this fact, that what you want in these friends, contrary to the established opinion, is that you really want them to be different rather than to be the same as you. It is always said that you need to find people who are similar to yourself. If you are similar with a person you have relations with, you will never have any new ideas. You will be stuck in your own little world. And the only way that there is creativity and invention in the world is when 2 people who are different stimulate each other to have thoughts which they could not otherwise have done, and when they get together and do things together which they could not do separately. And that transforms the whole notion we have of what our society should aim for. Our politics is always talking about how we must all get together and think the same thing and agree on something. We will never get agreement. We have never got agreement. And when we have got agreement, it has been a bogus agreement, and people have concealed what they really think. So we've got to learn to deal with difference, and we find that difference is really quite interesting. And so we have to learn how to talk in this way. Now, in the past, people used to teach you the art of conversation, and it used to be called rhetoric. And every secondary school had a class called rhetoric. But rhetoric, which was developed by the ancient Greeks, was a formula to teach you certain rules which would enable you to persuade other people that you are right and to win a battle against them. And it's particularly good for lawyers, it's good for democratic politics where you're trying to push your own opinions, but it does not establish friendship. And we are, I think now, seeking friendships in the sense that we are seeking a relationship of trust with someone, and someone who will be honest with us, someone on whom we can rely, and we're expanding beyond the family. The family used to be the unit, and you used to talk only to your family, or used to talk only to your tribe, and now we are expanding beyond that, and we want to have friends who will stimulate us and expand our horizons. And so that brings us to the purpose of this pastoral also. This is an excellent idea of saying, where can you meet people you never normally meet? Well, as I said, in the conversation meals which the Oxford News organizes, when you come in, and we had one just a couple of weeks ago on this site of the Olympic Stadium, which is being built, and 200 people came, 200 people who didn't know each other came, and we just put them together randomly, and they talked, and it worked very nicely, it's very exciting. And we've done this on many different occasions, in every social situation, and in many countries, in China, in India, in different parts of Europe, in Canada, and always bringing people who don't know each other. And so on a bus, you will find people you don't know. On a bus like this, perhaps in London, it's a bit difficult because you're going to get off after one or two stops. But on a long distance bus, on a train, the great problem is to find out who is willing to talk to you, because some people won't be left in peace. When the Eurostar was invented, I was invited to make suggestions to them. And I said, you ought to have one carriage which is silent, where people who don't want to talk can go and don't want any noise. You need one carriage where people can engage in conversation. And you need one carriage where people can learn French and have lessons. So at least there will be use in the Eurostar. And of course they decided they wanted to make money and they wanted in a restaurant and so on. But we are losing many opportunities to meet people we don't know. If you agree with me that the purpose of this century is completely different from what it was in the past. In the past we were forming nations. We were trying to avoid meeting people who disagreed with us. And we were creating myths about our nation, saying that in fact we all agree. But we know that we don't all agree. The myth about the British nation, as a book recently showed, was the idea of Britain was only invented in the 18th century. Before that, people did not consider themselves British. And indeed, in France, in the 19th century, there were people who could not speak French because they were peasants who spoke only their local dialect, and they could not understand peasants who spoke in other parts of France. And we've created this idea of a nation, but now we have the ambition of traveling as an essential part of growing up and feeling oneself as belonging to the world. And when we travel, we want to meet people and not just stare at the monuments and the buildings and mix with other tourists. And it is very difficult. And so we've got to create something which does not yet exist. We've got to create new institutions, new methods to satisfy our demands today, to satisfy our aspirations. And this is one example of how we can do it, but it will require quite a lot of work. Here we're just saying this is something to be done. How are we going to turn that into an institution?